Boys, we are back again with another live stream. Happy Sunday. Hope you've all had a good weekend, fellas. Happy to be here, spitting my thoughts again. Um, so yeah, as you can see from the title, this one is an interesting one. I think this definitely hits home or will hit home for a lot of people. So I've titled the live stream Bear the Stare: How I Destroyed My Fear of the Spotlight Effect. Now, before I get started, if you don't know who I am, my name's Ian. I am 28 years old, used to be an economic consultant, and I also used to be a data analyst. And now I'm moving into tech sales, um, just to, pivot in my career. But most importantly, and most relevant to this live stream and this channel, is the fact that I had a really scarce, poor dating life not too long ago. I was swiping on dating apps and I couldn't get any luck with the algorithm. I used to be in a relationship many years ago, and then once that ended, I basically had no action whatsoever. I actually was on a 4 year dry streak until 6 months ago. And the big main reason why I was able to end that dry streak and eventually transform my dating life for the better was because I learnt this skill called daytime cold approach. And after learning that skill, initially by myself, doing it solo, I eventually got better and better. And then I encountered a few hurdles and eventually reached out for coaching by a guy called Ephraim, who runs a channel called Pool University. And then my results skyrocketed. And I, yeah, and my dating life just transformed. I mean, the past 6 months since getting coaching, I've just been on way more dates, had way more romantic experiences, and right now I'm seeing a girl who I'm really attracted to. We get along, and yeah, I wouldn't wish for it to be any better than it is right now. So I'm very satisfied with my dating life, and it has just improved my entire life holistically. And so that's one of the big reasons why I started this channel, is because I wanted to share my journey, share my story, and hopefully inspire guys to get out there and try to approach to try and transform their dating lives, because this is an important part of life, whether you like to agree or not. And so once you sort this part of life out, then the rest of your life just sort of sorts itself out and it's a lot more enjoyable. And so, yeah, that's a bit about me. But let's get right into it. And if you're watching and you enjoy the stream, feel free to drop it a like. I appreciate any sort of support with the channel to try and get more guys to come across this content if it can help them, because it certainly helped me when I first started. Right, so let's get right into it, yeah? And I'll answer any comments at the end of the live stream, but feel free to drop them into the chat if you want to. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So this is actually inspired by the girl that I'm seeing right now. So she came over to my place last night, and we hung out, chilled, watched a movie, got some food, and then stayed overnight. And this morning we went to get a coffee at Pret before I dropped her off at the train station. And I don't know what we were talking about specifically, but actually I know what it was. So she had a really nice fit on, and she jokingly realized that her sneakers matched the coffee cup that she was holding. It was very random, but we kind of laughed about it. And then I mentioned this trend that people used to do on social media, right? And I think people still do it to this day, where they would basically, girls, typically girls, would post a photo of their outfit, and they would post that as the outfit of the day. I think on Instagram it's known as OOTD, right? And I know you're wondering, Ian, what the hell does this have to do with the title? Give me some time. Hey, what's up, Skateful Bros? Um, so yeah, so she, so, you know, I mentioned that trend, and then she goes, "Oh yeah, I like watching those videos." So she likes watching those videos on her social media where girls just put videos of their outfit and they, you know, twirl around and, you know, show their jeans or show their shoes or show their dress, whatever the case might be, right? And people like to watch this content, right? Especially girls. And so she tells me that she likes to watch it. And then I jokingly tell her, "Well, you look pretty nice today. Like, don't you want to try and post your outfit of the day? I think your followers might enjoy it." And of course, I'm not being serious, but she's like, "Nah, nah, like, I don't want to, you know, I don't want to be seen. It would be too awkward." And I was like, "Ah, so you're scared of people judging you, are you?" And she's like, "Yeah, like, I would love to, but," and she basically said, "I love the content, but I would never want to make the content." And of course, the reason why is because she would be a little bit afraid of people like judging her or seeing her. And so I told her, I was like, "Isn't it interesting how we love to watch that kind of content, but when if it ever came to us having to create that content in public, then we would be scared because we'd be afraid of what people would think about us, right?" And so she then responded and said, "Yeah, you know, I have to basically bear the stare," which I thought was a bar, a real like poetic bar. And so when I heard her say that, I was like, that's true. You have to bear the stare, meaning you have to be able to bear or endure the stares of other people if you're going to be the kind of person who's going to set up a tripod and record themselves doing a little bit of a dance or a little bit of a twirl in order to get that kind of content. And so this is what inspired me to talk about the spotlight effect, because that's what that is, right? So the spotlight effect is basically the idea that when we're outside in public or any type of situation where there's multiple people around, there is this sense that we are the center of the universe. And because we only experience life through our lens, through our perception, it often feels as if whenever we speak or whenever we gain attention from people, everybody is looking at us, right? And we feel like all their judgment or, you know, their judgment or just them looking at us in general, it sort of amplifies our sense of being seen. And that can be uncomfortable because when you have a bunch of people seeing you or perceiving you, well, then all of a sudden it feels like the spotlight is on you. It feels like everybody is judging you, right? And like I said, because we are the center of our own universe, it all sort of feels like this massive force or light coming into us or being shown or, you know, shining onto us. And as most people who aren't Hollywood actors or people who aren't used to being in the spotlight, that can be uncomfortable, right? Especially nowadays where most of us live online, a lot of us spend time working online, and even when we're not, let's say, you know, consuming content, a lot of us work remotely, so we're not even working in working spaces where there's lots of other people around us. We're pretty closed off. We spend a lot of time alone or more time alone. So we're not used to being around other people, right? Especially strangers. And so the spotlight effect for the average individual is very strong whenever they either, you know, make themselves heard or seen in these, let's say, situations. And so typically, most people tend to avoid the spotlight, right? So I'm sure you guys are like me, right? I typically, sometimes, to be fair, I still do this now, even though I've built the skill set of cold approach, but I'm introverted. So I don't necessarily like being the center of attention. So often when I'm going out to do shopping, I'll have my AirPods in and I'm in my own world, right? Not trying to talk to too many people. I'm just there to buy my cereal, there to buy my Weetabix, and then I'm going back home to my car and just driving back, right? And I'm locked into my own world. I'm not too concerned or trying to be the center of attention because I don't enjoy it. It's not my natural desire as an introverted guy, right? And so because that's my default state, as it is for many people, and I'm sure it's the same for people watching, the idea of, or a sort of any situation that I find myself in where people are now locked in on me, at one point that was very uncomfortable, right? And so I used to avoid it, right? And what does avoiding it look like? Well, we don't make a big fuss, right? So we don't speak loudly. We're not out here performing or jumping around, right? So for example, people tend to like to keep a low profile. So for example, people might speak slowly or with a lower volume if they're ordering something, or if they need to call over somebody at the checkout line because the self checkout isn't working. And you don't sort of project a commanding voice and to be like, excuse me, can you come and help me? Like a lot of people might like want to ask for help, but they're not loud about it, right? Because if you're louder than, let's say, the average person, then everybody's going to look at you, right? And people want to avoid that sense of being seen, right? And so as I keep on going through the live stream, and I'll talk about the ways that I dealt with it in terms of the spotlight effect, I want you to just associate the spotlight effect with being seen. It's simply the fear of being seen, right? And so, of course, this is normal. And if you feel like this, you're not alone. This is a very normal thing to feel, unless, like I said, you're some sort of Hollywood actor or performer who's used to performing in front of crowds. But in the context of cold approach and dating, I realized that if I wanted to get good at meeting women in public, in the streets, at the coffee shop, at the store, at the train station, then I had to overcome that fear of being seen, right? And why is that? Well, it's because ultimately, if we're approaching women in public, there will be people around if you're doing it correctly. And people are bound to be somewhat privy to your conversation. A lot of the time, most people just get on with their day because they have places to go to. And just like you're the center of your universe, other people are also the center of their own universe. So they're not actually thinking about you or focusing on you as much as you think. But of course, for brief moments, especially if you do an approach in a busy area where you're going to tell somebody, hey, excuse me, and you say that with a projecting, commanding voice, then yeah, people will turn their heads because people turn their heads when people say, excuse me, right? And so you can imagine a situation. Let me set the scene, right? Imagine there's a pretty girl at the bus stop. Yeah, she's on her phone and there's 10 people around her, all quietly waiting for that bus to pull up. Imagine going over to her with conviction and being like, hey, excuse me. And she looks up. As you say that, there will be other people who will either look up as well and look at what you're doing, or they'll maybe continue looking at their own business on their phone, but they'll still be privy to what you're saying, right? They'll be in earshot. And so you can imagine a situation, right? I can even imagine that people hearing me give this example are already getting anxious at the idea of them being this person, right? You go up to the girl at the bus stop, you say excuse me, and everybody's looking at you, right? And now you're gonna say you look incredible. Now, I mean, I don't know about you, but that's not that fun. Like it's a fairly daunting scenario, especially if you get rejected, right? Because then you get rejected. Let's say you say, "Excuse me, you look amazing," and she goes, "Oh, thank you, but I'm not interested." And then she looks back at her phone. Now you're standing there with your dick in your hand, not literally, metaphorically. Don't get arrested. You're standing there with your dick in your hand, and people. Oh, 1 second. Is my door open? Oh, I thought somebody was opening my door. Sorry for the brief break in the live stream, boys. I thought I heard somebody. Oh, there is someone. Okay. 1 second. I'll be back. I'm doing a live stream, but I think my flatmate is back from his holiday. All right. I'll. Actually, no. Let me continue. Let me continue doing it. You know what? He'll just do his thing. Um. But yeah. So basically, it was like, okay. you're afraid of people seeing you, right? And that can be quite a daunting prospect. So I get it. Like people are afraid of that. People are afraid of that being like an issue. But ultimately, I realized, well, you know what? You're gonna have to go through that either way. There's no avoiding that, right? Especially if we're trying to do this in as many situations as possible. So having realized that, I was like, okay, how do I deal with this then, right? Because if it's an inevitable part of this process, then it has to be dealt with, right? You can't avoid it. And so I realized, okay, shit. The goal here is, even though I don't naturally, um, even though I don't naturally, let's say, fall into that extroverted category, you still, I still had to get comfortable just throwing myself into those situations, right? And so I guess the antidote or the solution is to go head on into the spotlight, right? Like you literally have to just face it head on, like head on collision, no, no fear, right? And just go for it, right? Because in order to get better at dealing with it, you just have to face more situations. It's basically like exposure therapy, right? um, and that's how you get comfortable, right? And of course, there are many different ways in which you can get used to dealing with the spotlight outside of like that specific context of like walking up to the girl at the bus stop, because like I said, there's many different arenas or different parts of or activities or parts of life where we are always going to garner the spotlight, right? And so I think the most, like the biggest force or the biggest like let's say mover that will get you better at confronting that fear is to just do the approach as many times as possible, right? Because that in that specific context, now we're talking about self-worth issues and all this other stuff, right? So you're just going to get way better at dealing with that, let's say, that fear of being seen by just putting yourself in more reps simply off the rip, right? But if we're just like taking a step out or taking a step back, then there's also the side of, okay, how else can I improve that aspect of my, let's say, honestly, just social strength or ability to handle people viewing me outside of that dating context. And so if I look at my own perspective or if I look at my own experiences, I realize that there's actually a lot of different activities I've done that 100% allowed me to get more comfortable with this sort of fear, right? So I think the first one that I noted, and this is stretching back literally into like high school, and bearing in mind, I'm not saying that people need to do this 24. So I'm not saying that people have to go through the exact experiences that I've had since I was 14 in order to get good at this, because that's not realistic. People have limited time and there's only so much you can do. So again, I will reiterate that the best way to just get better at dealing with the spotlight effect in this context of code approach is to just approach more in more high pressure situations, and then you'll just be desensitized to that feeling. And it's funny because I think at a certain point, once you get good results, you actually embrace it more, right? So you actually enjoy it. It's almost as if you want more people to see you, you want more people to hear you, because at that point you're so comfortable with it that it's just a necessary part of the process. And also you realize that actually going in with full conviction and just not giving a fuck is like that is what gets you results. Like that's actually what makes you way more likely to fly with the skill. But aside from the dating context, I was if I'm looking back at everything I've done, I think there's some key let's say activities that really helped me. So the first one was just performing in front of audiences when I was in high school, specifically playing the drums. So I learned the drums when I was like 12 up until 16. And as I got better, I eventually got pushed into performing in front of my school. So that would have been at least 500 people. And then I also performed at sort of talent shows where we would compete with different schools. and this was a regular activity for me. And of course, that's a massive, let's say, example of, having to be in this high pressure situation where you've got a lot of people watching you. And I remember the first time I did that, that was like obviously scary. I was very scared. I actually almost backed out because my drum teacher basically, he didn't force me, but he really pushed me to do it. I never actually asked to perform. He just signed me up and said, I've signed you up and I expect you to perform. And, he kind of gave me that nudge. But, you know, of course, my biggest fear going into that was, what if I mess up? Yeah, what if I miss a note? What if I don't play the drum pattern as well? What if I lose my timing with the band and everybody who's in the audience notices and then I'm embarrassed, right? So you've got all these fears, right? Because I will say, I think a big part of the spotlight effect is the fear of being judged for making a big mistake. So that was obviously like a big fear at the start. But yeah, that was like, I guess, the first instance where I really had to perform in front of a lot of people. So that was big. Um, and then, of course, I guess fast forwarding a bit more from school was just the workplace. So presenting projects or presentations in front of colleagues. So at my last company, we would have days where, or events where we would all come together as a company and have this sort of corporate retreat. And during that retreat, certain people would be tasked with presenting a certain subject just to inform the rest of the company about their particular area of expertise. And of course, like you'd have to prepare a presentation and perform it, right, in front of the company. And so in this case, it's like, what's the fear there? Well, obviously, I'm standing up, performing, and talking to all these people, kind of like a TED talk. And again, that can be quite scary for the uninitiated person who's never done that before, right? And all, of course, in that moment, you are the center of attention because everybody's watching you present the figures or present whatever narrative or whatever piece of information you're trying to convey. So yeah, that was like another example of having to deal with that spotlight effect, right? The work context is a bit different because it's all about competency, and people obviously think, oh shit, what if people what if you mess up a certain aspect of your presentation and that sort of thing. But ultimately, if you understand the universal traits I'm trying to talk about, you see what I'm saying, right? So that was the second one, and then the third one was improv. So this is my favorite, and I'll dive a bit deep into this one. But I think a year ago, was it a year ago? It was August 2025, I believe. Yeah. Yeah. So last year, um, sorry, no, it was 2024. 2024 August. Yeah. So it was like, yeah, it was a year and a bit ago, actually. A year and some change. So I signed up for an improv class. I was inspired to do it by Chris Williamson, the podcaster, and it was like an 8-week improv course in London. And a big reason why I did it was, one, it seemed quite fun, and I was just testing out different random stuff to do on the weekend because I was getting quite bored. And but I also saw it as a way to, let's say, I don't know, like just be a bit silly and not take things too seriously and just have some fun, and also develop that sort of um like free flowing extroverted side, I guess is the right way to describe it. Um, and I think also I knew that it would help with communication as well. And I wanted to get into public speaking too, which I wasn't able to do at that time because I signed up to a few clubs. So I'm sure you guys have heard of Toastmasters. So I tried doing a Toastmasters. I tried signing up for a Toastmasters group, but I think that club closed, the one that's local to my area. So I just decided, okay, if this isn't going to happen, then the only other way to sort of improve my, let's say, public speaking skills would be improv. So I signed up for that 8-week course. And obviously, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but it was such a like a pivotal experience, and it taught me so much about what most people are afraid of in terms of socializing, because, of course, improv was all about, you know, improvisation and thinking of lines or scenes on the spot. And of course, there's the comedic element, so trying to do that in a funny, amusing way. But I think in terms of the spotlight effect, obviously it was a group, so you would basically go onto the stage, and then your teacher would, or my teacher would give us like a scene to basically play out from beginning to end, completely improvised. And you would do this in front of your group, which was like a group of like 10 of us or 15 of us. And obviously at the start, that shit was fucking terrifying because when you're at the beginning of the course, you don't know anything. You're not that good. You're not used to doing this, right? It feels high pressure, and the inevitably every single person there, apart from the guys who were a bit more, let's say, advanced with the skill, everybody there was a beginner, so they messed up completely at the start, right? You would stutter, you would blank, your mind would blank, right? And you're blanking in front of all these people looking at you on the stage, and it's uncomfortable. It's you don't feel great. You feel like you kind of feel retarded, like you don't feel great, and yeah, that would just be obviously like a scary thing to do. But I think over that over the course of that program, I just eventually became comfortable with messing up in front of people, and I think that's the best part about improv, because with the musical performances and with the work presentations, there was always that pressure to get it right, because at work I'm presenting in front of colleagues. When it came to music, I'm performing in front of my friends in the school. But with improv, there was a bit more freedom to make mistakes, and so I think that was the real valuable lesson there. It's like, when I did my first session, I remember the teacher was like, in this space, in this environment, the idea of making mistakes or failing is celebrated, right? Like, we're actually trying, like, the whole point of getting better at improv is to suck at first and to embrace the fact that you're going to be terrible, because you're naturally not used to improvising at this level, at this pace, at this frequency, right? Because we're not actors. Most of us weren't actors. Most of us weren't comedians. So the fact that they laid that foundational rule at the start as a sort of way to ease us into the process of becoming more comfortable with that spotlight effect of being seen making mistakes and looking stupid, right? Because you look stupid. Like it was cringy, right? Like, you would, like, those first few weeks, those first few sessions were cringy, right? People would make bad jokes, people would stumble, the scenes would go in weird places. Sometimes it was funny, sometimes it wasn't funny, and you just had to deal with that cringe, right? And that perceived judgment from other people, um, especially when you were the one in the scene looking at everybody else, right? But once I finished the course, I mean, it just completely shifted my perspective on, what it means to be, let's say, socially, like, adept or skilled, because most people are afraid of looking stupid because of ego. So yeah, and then moving on from improv, I think just, you know other exercises that I've done is like social freedom exercises. So not being afraid of filming myself in public. I do it all the time. If I'm sending video messages to my friends, I literally get my phone out, record myself in public, and don't give a fuck, really. Which again is something that I used to cringe about, but then the more I did it, the more I realized nobody really cares. Um, and I actually have a I have a funny video of me recording a video in the train. Um, I think I was recording like a birthday message for my mum, and I basically took out my phone and just like asked everybody to ask everybody uh, to say happy birthday to my mum. So I might post that actually. I might post that at some point. But yeah, that's like an extreme example, right? But again, just another way to get comfortable with people seeing you and people seeing you do silly stuff, right? Because nobody's afraid of being seen in high regard, if that makes sense. Like, nobody's afraid of being seen if they're doing well, right? If they look cool, or if they look interesting. Like, nobody cares about the spotlight effect in that sense. People only care about the spotlight effect when they look silly or they look cringe, or they look vulnerable, right? Um, so yeah, I think it's I think because obviously I titled it like how to destroy the fear of spotlight effect, but I think an important caveat is you have to understand that your fear isn't necessarily a fear of being seen. I think it's a fear of being seen looking stupid or looking silly or being seen making a mistake or being seen as a failure, whatever the case might be. Because I don't think most guys would really care too much about being rejected if it wasn't in front of other people. I think most people wouldn't care about that. I think what makes it more difficult to deal with is the idea that other people will see you get rejected. Um, so yeah, always it's always worth bearing that in mind. Um, but yeah, that's it. And then I guess the last one example that came to mind was a recent one. So when I was in Kenya, one of the main reasons I was there was to see my friend get married, and I was part of the groom's party. And yeah, she asked me to do a speech in front of the wedding guests, and it was a big wedding. It was probably like maybe 200 people, and obviously I didn't say no. I was never gonna say no, but I certainly was a little bit nervous going into it, but not that much to be honest, because at this point, with everything that I've done in the past few years, as I've just listed, I'm already comfortable with that idea of people seeing me and hearing me, and the potential, um, well, the potentiality to make a mistake in front of people. So, for example, I might do a speech and in the middle, I might forget one of my lines or whatever, and so I'm already at peace with that reality or that potentiality. So I was a lot less nervous going into this, and I was actually a lot more confident going into it, and and I felt that throughout the speech, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. I even made a bit of a live stream about it actually. But yeah, a lot of people came up to me and were like, "Yeah, you did the speech really well. You came across so confident." Like, yeah, I got a lot of people coming up to me afterwards, and I think a big reason was because I wasn't afraid of actually like sort of owning the moment and owning the stage and owning the space, which I think a lot of people might struggle to do when they're in that sort of high pressure social situation, especially in front of friends and family, right? Because of course it's one thing to be judged by strangers. I don't think, again, it's still a fear, but it's one thing to be judged by strangers. It's another thing to be judged by people you know, like friends, family, colleagues. So that adds another layer of pressure, right? Because yeah, I've noticed that people will always ask me things like, yeah, but what if my friend sees me approach, or what if my colleague sees me approach at my lunch break, right? Like that adds another level of fear, which is understandable because you have a reputation and you're trying to uphold that reputation. But if you ask me, I think the reputation aspect is understandable, but I think it's just a front. I think ultimately the real fear is having your ego hurt. Um, but yeah, I guess to end it there, I guess my point is, if you want to get better at this in terms of destroying that fear of that spotlight, then you literally just have to put yourself out there more and just embrace it. It's exposure therapy 101. There's nothing else I can really say. Um, that's it. I mean, obviously, there's the other elements of the shame piece, which I've talked about a lot. You can go watch videos on me talking about shame, dealing with shame, because I think that's another, let's say, detrimental force that prevents people from owning the spotlight because they don't want to be seen because they don't like themselves. Um, and so if that's the case, then yeah, that makes it a lot more difficult to like embrace that spotlight or that effect of being seen. So that's another like inner game level aspect of this whole, let's say, process. But if we're talking about like behaviorally, yeah, you just have to keep on doing it again and again and again, and then you just become desensitized, which is certainly the sort of process that I took to get better. But yeah, that's it. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. So, what's my boy saying? Ella Stewart says hi, what's up? Brooke Davis says hi, what's up, Brooke? If you're still watching. Uh, I think Jay says literally stumbled across your page the other day. seen the approaching in Thailand video, and now your live came across my feed. Nice. Thanks for the support, bro. Hope you found the content interesting. Jay asks me where am I based right now? The UK? Yeah, I'm based in the UK, bro. Yeah. Um, cool. Okay, I think that's it for now. To be fair, this one I wanted to be short, and also I need to. My flatmate just arrived, so I need to catch up with him, and then I've got a call with my other friend, and then I've got my tech sales course to get prepared for. So yeah, busy Sunday for me, lads, but yeah, we take it all. We take it all in stride. So hopefully that was useful. I'll probably do a more detailed sort of video like on the main channel about spotlight effect and being seen, because honestly I think this is like the biggest hiccup for a lot of guys, just being afraid of being seen amongst other people. But I think to end the stream, I think the last point I'll make is one that I like to always refer to, which is the which is the cosmic perspective and the floating rock theory, which is just, regardless of how afraid you are, regardless of how daunting it is to potentially be judged after getting rejected or whatever the case might be, whatever situation it is, ultimately you're going to die. We're all going to die, and it's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things, right? So yeah, like just understand that it's not that big of a deal. If you really zoom out and take that cosmic perspective, you're like one person in a world of 8 billion people, in a big solar system, in a galaxy of millions of galaxies, in a galaxy of millions of galaxies, in an ever expanding universe, you know? So yeah, and the people that the judgment you're afraid of, I mean, who are the people you're afraid of? It's not like it's gonna really affect you materially. Maybe emotionally it will, but over a long enough time horizon, you just forget about all those rejections. You forget about all those awkward, cringe experiences, because life moves on. So yeah, hopefully that is somewhat comforting. But yeah, that's it. Lots of likes on the stream, so I appreciate that support, boys. Otherwise, enjoy your Sunday. I'm gonna clock out. And yeah, speak soon now. But take care, boys.